Hello, I'm Pumlan Babela. Welcome to the third video of my SOA tutorial series. In this tutorial, we're going to discuss the JBoss ESB folder structure. But before we do that, let's quickly discuss the selection criteria for an ESB. Just in case you're wondering how did we end up using the JBoss ESB. When you look at given any software, when you're purchasing software, there's a criteria you should use. It's usually I'm going to highlight a few pointers. 1. Usability. 2. Maintainability. 3. Community, basically what this means is, do you have open source backing for this ESB? Is there community behind it, that people who will pick up bugs and report to them and so forth, and create literature for it? Enterprise support, is it supported? Can you buy support from another company? Functionality, flexibility, expandability and connectors, they somewhat go hand in hand. The cost, some ESBs are free, some are paid for, and licensing, of course. I think that's about it. Let's also touch base on applications, ESB applications. How do you use them? You can use it as a single point of access, meaning, let's say you've got different services that are distributed on different machines, different buildings, different provinces, different countries, and then you have clients connecting to these services. If you have an ESB as a single point of access, all your clients can connect to an ESB in South Africa, and that ESB is gonna route the services to the appropriate destinations. The beauty of this arrangement is that if a service changes, you migrate it from one server to another, meaning it changes the location. The clients do not have to know about it. You only need to modify the ESB, because the clients connect to the ESB and the addresses will always be the same. So you'll only have to change it on one location in the ESB. You don't have to change it on the on the clients. That's a benefit. Another way of using it, you can use it as a transaction manager. Let's say you've got distributed web services that needs to act. You have a distributed transaction from multiple services, and you want this transaction to complete together, fail, all the steps to complete together, or else it fails. You can also use a transaction manager. You can also use it as a security manager. I once worked for a prominent bank in South Africa where we had a security service. It's an application that exposes a web service, and clients can authenticate via that web service. You can also use it as a service proxy or a gateway. Okay, the disadvantages of of using an ESB. Can't think of. Let's see. Okay, it can be a single point of failure. Meaning, if you remember, you've got clients connecting to the ESB. If the ESB is down, the clients cannot talk to the services. But you can also mitigate that by having a redundant server and a load balancer, where you have systems mirrored on another server. If one system is down, you have a load balancer that will pick up that and then route whatever traffic to the server that's available. Okay, quickly, I'm planning to keep this tutorial short, so let's quickly decide. This is the web server, JBoss 6.1. We're gonna start discussing the folders from left to right. The bin folder, the binary folder. Here we've got scripts. These ones are utilities. All this starts with WS. Those are utility scripts for testing web services and stuff like that. And then we have that self-explanatory shutdown. That's the code. These are the scripts for invoking shutdown. That's run. That's for running, meaning for starting the server. This is for turning. Let's say you're running this installation on Windows. So yeah, you'll use this scripts allows you to run JBoss as a Windows service. In case you have noticed, okay, there's there's a script for Windows and a script for Linux. This is the same script. This one is for probing a cluster. If you using JBoss in a clustered environment, you can do discover of clusters and things like that. So that's password for Linux and Unix. These are control scripts that is operating system specific. That's OpenSUSE, that's Solaris Head, Red Hat, that's Hewlett Packard Unix. And let's see what else we need to discuss. Tweedle. Okay, this is a script that's supporting jar. There you've got code that does okay, it works in conjunction with JMX management. Okay, that's about it. Let's go to the next. Okay, these are client jars. If you're using JBoss clients outside the server, like you have an EJB client, there's certain jars you're gonna need from that folder. Common. Okay, these are your admin consoles. Basically, you have your admin console, your web service console, your EJB console, your JMX console, and so forth. These are the supporting libraries for those consoles. And then this folder, it's worth viewing. You should just browse the configuration. You have configuration examples here on how to configure things. And then library, these are libraries. These libraries are general libraries that apply to all server configurations. And then lastly, server. Okay, here we've got server configurations or profiles. Basically, we're gonna discuss them from left to right. Let's start with all is an extension of default. All supports everything, including JXR, IIOP, and clustering service. So if you're in a clustered environment, you're gonna use all. But if you're not like me, you're gonna use default. Default is usually sufficient for normal deployments. Now, okay, that's all. Default supports all services except JXR, IIOP, and clustering services. This is a lightweight web container. It supports JTA, JCA, and JPA. And then you have minimal profile. This profile, it's lightweight. It supports JNDI and logging. In case you're wondering why would you have a configuration like that, sometimes you want to, if you want to create an efficient server, you want to start with the bare minimums, like 0 services, and add services depending on your needs. The advantage of doing that is that at the end of the exercise you end up with a server configuration that's efficient. You're not running services that you're not, this application is not making use of. That's the beauty of doing that, but it might take you a while. Standard, it is a certified Java EE configuration compliant. Okay, what we're gonna do now, we're gonna go one level down. We're gonna use default as an example. But whatever we're gonna discuss under default, it's applicable to all other server configurations. So instead of discussing this folder and then after this folder, we're just gonna discuss one folder. Remember, whatever we discuss on that folder, it's applicable to all of these folders in this level. Default. Okay, this is a fresh installation. We haven't executed it, so there's folders. If you have already if you have run your server, you're gonna have more folders than me. There's I think, okay, data, this one was created by the ESB installation, but we stopped private data, but there's nothing here. Later on you're gonna see stuff. Once we fire it up, you have private data, the ESB data, and the server data. There's another folder we're gonna get called work. This folder, that's where compiled JSPs reside. So if you have a problem with the JSP, you want to fault find it, what you'll do is you'll look at a JSP gets translated from being a JSP to a servlet. The code will reside in the work directory. So if you want to fault find a JSP, you can view that. It's much easier to pick up the problem if you view the Java code. And then also, if you want to clear cache, maybe your server is acting up, the application is acting up, you undeploy it, you clear that folder. That folder, you can delete it between restarts. The folders that are not here, that is work, temp is temporal folder, it's used as a stretch pad, and log. Log is also created at runtime. The folder keeps log. Normally there's 3 files: boot log, server log, audit log. By default, when upon server startup, the server logs on boot log. That is when it's bootstrapping. And then at some point, once the logging framework is good to go, it will hand over to log4j. At that point now, it's going to log to server.log. And then the last file, it's audit log. It's used for security reasons, for your logon, things like that. Okay, cool. And then we've discussed data, deploy libraries. These are your library supporting libraries, configuration. I think we need to quickly discuss configuration. Java policies. This is where you define your permissions, where you grant permissions to your classes. Another folder that's worth looking at, it's this one. You have configuration for users and roles. If you look at, let's look at this file, you're gonna see we have a use. This is a username. Okay, let's look at one. I want the one that has admin. I think this one, admin. This is a user. This is a user you're gonna use to log on in this console. Capiche? Capiche. Basically all of them, they revolve around that. That's for bootstrapping, application startup. That's also supporting file for that. This is where you'll define your realms, security realms. I think also your login modules. Okay, but I'm not too sure, but that is tend to be corrected. Okay, deployers. This is a deployer for EJB modules. When I say EJB modules, I mean JAS, EJB JAS, like file.ejb. This is an ESB deployer, like ESB files, meaning file.esb. Files that have an extension .esb, they're going to be deployed. That deployer is responsible for them. Files that have a .ejb, this deployer is responsible for them. Sim, this deployer is responsible for them, and so forth. Okay, these are a function of the ESB. They came, if you look at the original JBoss server 6.1, before the installation of ESB, we don't have that folder. Deploy, this is the last folder we're going to discuss. That's HornetQ. Excuse me, sometimes I refer to HornetQ as HornetMQ. Okay, cool. This is the service archive. Okay, let me quickly discuss these folders. Let's look at this file and that file. The difference between these are both wars. This is an packed war and this is an unpacked war. The reason why you will deploy an unpacked war on a server is to limit the startup time. Instead of inflating, remember a jar, it's there's a compression that's associated with it. So when a server deploys it, it inflates the jar, so it unzips it and then works on the data. So if it's not zipped, then it doesn't have to unzip, and that saves time. So that's why we have service archives like that, where it's a folder. ESB archive, resource adapt. This is a resource adapter. So they're just normal deployments. They just unpacked deployments. Cool. So that's a service archive. Okay, that's HornetQ for message queuing. This adds support for RMI over HTTP, which is tunneling RMI over HTTP. Later on, I'll try to see if we can do a tunneling example. this I forgot it. Internal services, like the dead letter service for the ESB. The dead letter service, it's when let's say you've got a service, and that service has got a retry mechanism. Where there's a failure, it goes to this mechanism. It'll try retry maybe 3 times, and then if it fails, that message will go sit in the dead letter service. Dead letter service is a database. uh, it's you're gonna have a table. That table is gonna have the message details, like the message and stuff, but the message is encrypted. I'm not too sure if it's encrypted by default or you need to. This is another service archive for register. It registers a RMI interface for JUDDI. This is the registry, the JUDDI registry. This is where by default this points to hyper SQL. We might change it later on, I'm not too sure, but I like to have I've got another installation of JBoss where I've changed it to point to my SQL. This is the embedded JBoss web service archive. This is a full-blown JBBM runtime environment with the admin console. Basically, we're gonna use this later on in the advanced stages of this course to integrate business rule to web services. Web services, they should invoke some business rule and something should happen, and maybe later on we'll also attach rules and do something funky with it. This one is needed for rules evaluation using JBoss rules. Let's say you've got content-based routing, you use JBoss rules. That's an archive file, this JMS raw. It's a resource adapter for deploying any JMS implementation. Mod class, we're not gonna use this, but it's actually an HTTP load balancer that simplifies the setup of HTTP clusters. Remember, when you have a cluster, you need to have a load balancer of some sorts that's going to route traffic to the relevant server instance according to some algorithm. Raw, this is a WAR file, a WAR folder, but it's just a WAR file. I can use those terms interchangeably. It's used to integrate Tomcat. Security, that's used for security configuration for loading static security domains, I think. And then this encompasses the EJB processor. We're going to see later on from our ESB action pipeline, we're going to invoke an EJB. We're going to use an EJB processor. That's what that folder, that's what this deployment is for. And then Smokes is a general utility framework or transformation framework, depending on who you ask, but I like the first description, general utility framework. That also transforms things. Okay, later on we're gonna do message transformations where we have a message coming, we want to change something or we want to add something to it. We're going to use Smokes for that. And then that's for SOAP support. SOAP UI client, it's used by the ESB to communicate to external services, usually the gateway modules. You're going to see later on we're going to implement the inbound outbound strategy where we've got inbound modules and outbound modules. The outbound modules, they will be talking to external web services, they will make use of that, but this is transparent to us. We don't have to, it's good to know, but we don't it's good to know when you're troubleshooting JBoss, but we really don't have to know it, I guess. Spring ESB, that's Spring Framework. UUID generator. Let's finish these two. I don't really understand them, but I think they have something to do with entity primary key generation and sequencing numbers generators. and I mean that one, and then this one. So this is a generator, key generator. It's like a random number generator of some sorts. And lastly, this folder, it's for JBoss remoting. But what bothers me is this. I'm not sure if it's used because there's no deployers for it, but we have a deployer for that. I'm not sure if we have a deployer for this archive. But anyways, and then there's now supporting configuration. We have configuration for, okay, this one, it aids JBoss with WSDLs and service contracts, things like that. And I'm not too sure why it's not unpacked. I also battle to understand why this WAR file is not under this service archive. But anyways, these are supporting JARs for EJB, JDBC, mail, Quartz. The timer service makes use of that. Shrink wrap extension, I'm not sure what's that. And we also have configuration file for this functionality, like the scheduler service. This is you can configure here manage bins. So you can configure mf manage bins and use it as a scheduler and schedule that bin to do some work. We're definitely gonna do an example. I've used that before. I do have example code that we can use. Okay, I think that's about it for this tutorial. The next tutorial, we're going to integrate now this JBoss ESB to our Eclipse and fire it up. Thank you for watching. Cheers, bye.